welcome back to the Nap Trapped podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Welcome back. And before we begin, I've got to say, happy birthday, Sally.
Oh, thank you. The big 3-6.
3-6, is that all? You're super young. You're just a spring chicken.
I don't know. I definitely feel like I'm still in my 20s.
I think that, I don't know if
Definitely.
that actually ever leaves you. I still feel 24 and I'm 43. So
That's good. And look at us. We're tackling technology. We've still got
know
it.
we are. Oh my God, just barely. Just barely. My husband would say I'm an absolute nightmare when it comes to technology, but I'm learning. I'm still learning. You're still allowed to learn at this
Oh,
age.
you should have seen the assistants I had to set up today. And look, I'm just on the couch. I'm like, the talent is here. Set up around me. All right, let's get into today's episode. So this episode is all about why we as sleep consultants love a 9:30 a.m. first nap for, and we'll get specific here, for a baby that is on 2 naps. So we're talking 8 to 9 months is usually when we are putting our babies on to 2 naps, and probably up until 12 months before they start more of a transitional schedule heading into 1 nap territory. So this is all about why we hold so steady with the 9:30 a.m. first nap and why it prevents so many sleep issues from spiraling. And I think one of the main reasons, and this is what we'll go through, is that as sleep consultants, one of our main jobs for our families is to troubleshoot, because we know that we can give you the best and most age appropriate schedule, and your baby's going to look at that and say, no thanks. Or not today. Yesterday, the day before, no problem, but not today. And so one of our jobs is to troubleshoot and future proof your day and then protect your night. And so we're going to be talking about why the 9:30 a.m. first nap is going to help in all of those ways.
Yeah, it's a very simple way to future-proof your day and to ensure your nights are still going to be on track. And it also helps with the dreaded early rise. So 3 big things that, can derail your entire day.
So I love fixing early rising, which sounds like I don't love it for the families that they get an early rise, but early rising has a root cause always. There is, and I'm less inclined to just say, oh, well, they're a baby. Babies and toddlers start their day at 5 a.m. Not in my opinion. I do not subscribe to that. So the good news is that we can get you to a later rise. And one of the most common and understandable culprits, and look, we will definitely do a full episode dedicated to early rising because there is so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But one of the main causes is that your first nap of the day ends up being brought too far forward, so it becomes earlier, and that in and of itself reinforces an early rise. So hear me out. A baby that starts waking at 5 a.m. doesn't go back to sleep, maybe even despite your best sleep training efforts, your resettling techniques, your desperation in those hours, your baby does not go back to sleep. And understandably, they start showing that they are cranky and tired and getting into overtired territory. So rather than pushing through to a 9:30 nap, maybe you put your baby down at 8:30. And I get it, because the logic is there that, hey, they were up from 5. I don't want overtiredness. They can't make it through. But what that in fact does is it shifts your baby's internal body clock to say, oh, I don't have to wake up any later than 5 because I get this next nap to compensate. So they start the body clock, they kind of get on a different time zone. Like I always relate it to like, okay, they're on New Zealand time and we want to get them on, Melbourne time. And it can just fast become habitual. So when we are wanting to fix an early rise and I look at a family's nap time, and remember we're talking 8 to 9 months to 12 months on 2 naps, the first thing I want to do is that make sure that their first nap, regardless of what time that baby woke, is at 9:30 a.m. Because what that does is it avoids reinforcing that early rise. And look, there are other benefits that Bec will go into in this episode to the 9:30, but from an early rising perspective, that is the time that we hold steady with. And I think one of the then understandable follow-up questions that families have about that is like, okay, great, I understand the assignment of and the logic and the why. I'm going to push through to 9:30, but my baby is so tired, so overtired. I'm going to get a short rubbish nap rather than this like lovely 9:30 till 11 that I have written on their sleep plan. And my answer to that is yes. That is the natural byproduct of pushing a baby through longer than their desired wake window. And although as sleep consultants we're always talking about let's try and avoid overtiredness.
Oh yeah, we bang on about it.
Don't we? We should like do a tally of how many times we mention the word overtired in all of our podcast episodes. We'll do a drinking game. But it's just it's just part of this process. And in this scenario, we do not have to be afraid of it. Yes, your babies might be cranky. Yes, they may even get a second wind and not be cranky and then look far too energized to even want a nap. And here is where I would say, if that is the case, you have no rules outside of no feeding to sleep. And you can find out more about why we say that in our last episode. But you can fully assist your baby while you are breaking out of that early rising, pushing through to 9:30 cycle. Pram, car nap, rock them, bounce them, skydive with them. It doesn't matter. We just want to support them in getting that nap in. And then as the early rise fixes and gets later, cool, you can go back to that lovely self-settling cot nap. But we just sort of anticipate and know that overtiredness will occur. Cool. Well, they're not in on the plan. We're making a change for their body clock, but we're going to hold steady with 9:30 to avoid early rising.
Yeah, and that it always falls back to short-term pain for long-term gain. So there is a method to the madness, and that's why, you know, as sleep consultants, we've always got a plan up our sleeve in terms of how we're going to resolve things. And so we're often, you know, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of families. And so we're just sort of creating little bite-sized chunks for families to start sort of chipping away at so that we can ultimately get to the end goal. So the 9:30 nap is a really good way to kickstart resolving, you know, early bedtimes, wonky schedules, and the dreaded early rise. So yeah, absolutely. The first tip for an early rise is the 9:30 nap.
Absolutely. And you make a good point there, because what happens with an early rise is you then end up with an early bed.
Exactly,
and then,
right.
you know, that perpetuates the early rise. If, you know, they're going to bed in the 5s or the early 6s, chances are they're going to continue to wake. And it's not even early rising. That's just, you know, they've hit their overnight sleep quota, but it is definitely too early for us.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's also other reasons why we hold on to 9:30 in terms of the what ifs that babies like to throw at us when we're trying to get days on track.
So a 9:30 nap will help to sort of anchor your second nap in for the day as well. So quite often, for example, if you've had a little one that's waking at 5 and then they're into bed at 8:30 for the first nap, they might have a fairly decent nap, but that might finish at 9:30. Well, you know, at 10 months, the second nap is going to happen 3 hours later. So if your first nap is finished at 9:30, your second nap is going to start at 12:30. And if they're going to have a really decent nap of, say, an hour and a half for nap 2, that's going to finish at around the 2 o'clock mark. So you're kind of moving into a 2-nap schedule that ends with the day at 6 o'clock, which for a lot of families is totally fine. But for a lot of families, it means that, you know, come 6 o'clock, mum and dads aren't home, or, you know, the partners aren't home. And so there's a little bit of missing out on, you know, one-on-one time and so forth. So that's a common concern for a lot of families that come my way in terms of just, can we restructure things to have a little bit more, you know, end time, like time at the end of the day to
Just
as a
shift
family
the
unit.
schedule.
shifting the schedule. But if your first nap is happening at 9:30 rather than 8:30, then your second nap is going to start a little later, which naturally pushes bedtime out. So for example, you might have a 9:30 nap that starts at 9:30 and then ends at 10:30. 3 hours later, your second nap is starting at 1:30. That gets you to, say, a 3 o'clock wake time from nap 2, and then naturally your bedtime is 7. So, if everything falls into place, nap-wise, beautiful, then you're kind of getting a 7 o'clock bedtime. But even if your first nap isn't amazing, and say you've had like a bit of a disaster nap, perhaps you've had to take your older child to swimming lessons or so forth, and so your baby's only getting, a 30-minute nap in the morning, so 9:30 till 10, it still means that your second nap is going to start at a decent time and provide that opportunity for a well-rested second nap. So a little one that's waking at 10 o'clock just after a 30-minute nap is going to need to go down sometime between 12:30 and 1. And creating that optimal sleep pressure for a second nap was going to assist with the ability to lengthen and link naps for nap 2 and ultimately get you to a really good bedtime. If both naps go a little bit wonky, so for example, you've got a 9:30 nap and that only, ends up being a 45-minute sleep, you would still use your 3 hours. So 10:15 gets you to 1:15 for nap 2. And maybe you've only got an hour sleep then, so 1:15 to 2:15. Not the greatest in terms of daytime sleep. It's
but these are the realities. This is what
the
happens.
reality. And then it just means that you're still going to be able to get a well-rested bedtime. So 4 hours later for a 10-month-old would get you to a 6:15 bedtime. So it's not ideal, but it's not extraordinarily early either.
It's your good backup plan.
Yeah, it is your good backup plan. So the difference would be if you're, and again, sorry, I'm going to use lots of different analogies here. Say you had those funny little naps that happened, but nap 1 started at 9:30. The difference in half an hour, so if nap 1 was at 9 o'clock and you had a 45-minute nap there, and nap 2 was also a disaster, you're going to end up with a bedtime in the 5s.
Yeah.
And, that's a really tricky scenario to get yourself in, to get out. So either you would add a third nap in, which for a lot of 10-month-olds or 11-month-olds, they're going to be very hesitant to take.
They
You're
don't
going to have
want
to
that.
work your ass off to get that.
Yeah.
And it may not happen. Or you're just going to have to be okay with an earlier bedtime. So, it's a really
chances
tricky one.
are maybe on the first night you might get a slightly later rise in the morning, but you do set yourself up for what feels like an early rise. If they have gone to bed in the 5s, they could very well be waking in the 4s to 5s, and then you're really having to stretch until 9:30, or you're really having to resettle a baby that has already done 11 hours overnight. So it can be a bit of a stitch up. And look, these things happen. But I guess you and I always talk about anchoring in feed times and using that anchoring sort of analogy and visual. I think 9:30 is another anchoring point for this age group and nap structure, so that kind of no matter what happens, 9:30 comes around the next day, and that's where you turn up to put your baby to sleep, whether that's an assisted nap due to overtiredness or a self-settling in the cot, and the rest of the day stays relatively on track. But that will prevent a lot of these other trickier sleep issues from becoming ingrained.
Yeah, that's right. Because the one thing, it's, the days and sometimes weeks will tend to go off track a little bit depending on what stage your baby's at, what skills they're mastering, maybe you're on holiday and so forth. But one thing that we want to do is hold steady on a number of things. We want to hold steady on our anchored feeds, and we want to hold steady on this 9:30 nap, because that's a really great way for your little one to understand what time of the day it is. So the internal clock works really hard, and it helps them to sort of be able to anticipate what's coming up next. So your morning might go really skew with, but come 9:30, that's a reset. So that's a reset, and they've had their nap. Now they know that once the nap is done, they're going to get their feed at 11, and they're going to get, so forth, or whatever's happening next. So it's a bit of a reset button for them, and then you're able to sort of troubleshoot the rest of the day to get yourself back on track. But the internal clock is a huge factor for maintaining really great sleep habits and behaviours and patterns. So don't underestimate the power of a 9:30 nap.
I know, that's the moral of the story. It will rescue and prevent. We're all about future-proofing and preventing.
Yes.
And then, yes, of course, we kick into gear where we have to do some rescuing for families. But the biggest takeaway from this is 9:30 a.m. will prevent a lot of things from spiraling. And we all have average days. We all have days where things did not go to plan despite our best efforts. You just start again the next day with a 9:30 a.m. nap and push forward. And now you'll know to hold steady with your feed times. They don't have to change because your nap times aren't changing. And I think this is a really good example of where the mental load of so many families of having to calculate wake windows. Okay, so they've been up from this time. If they fall asleep this time, that means I can't do a 4 hour, they'll be sleeping through my scheduled feed time. We can just lighten the load immediately. And it's like a plug and play, The next day, it's just 9:30. And you've got all your feed times laid out, plus or minus a little bit of an earlier bed.
So the other big takeaway too is that even though on day one we are really stretching baby to get to 9:30, they've been awake from 5 o'clock potentially, we're stretching them all the way through until 9:30. Very quickly that's going to change. That's not a forever thing. That is just a temporary measure
Short
to get
term.
your bedtime. Bedtime will then hopefully be closer to 7 o'clock that night. If this little one is doing an 11-hour night, automatically he or she's going to go down at 7 o'clock, sleep all the way through until 6 or just after 6 that morning, and then you're back on track with the age appropriate wake window to get to a 9:30 nap. It's a really quick turnaround if you can hold steady and just fully commit, for the first
just like jet lag
morning or two.
Push through like jet lag.
Push through, exactly right. But it's a really great way to get things back on track for sure.
And no rules for that first nap.
No.
So we've just given you permission to throw all of the sleep consulting rules out the window for an overtired baby to get that 9:30 a.m. nap in while you're fixing that early rise.
Yeah, and the main reason for that is it's a circadian rhythm issue, like an internal clock rhythm rather than a self-settling issue. So that's another reason why we can sort of throw everything at it just to rejig the internal clock. And then once you've got your little one's clock back on schedule for a different type of nap structure, then you can go back in with all right, now here's your chance to self-settle, show me what you've got. So yeah, for sure. That's what we do.
Amazing. Well, I hope this episode was helpful. This is an example of why there is method to our madness, and why understanding the why of us suggesting these things, it's not just an arbitrary number because, hey, we like babies to sleep at this time and we like morning tea at this time. No, there's actually sleep science behind it, and this one fixes and prevents so many issues. So if you're dealing with nap struggles, we'd also love to hear from you. Send us a message, write a comment on this recording. We've got resources, and our DMs are always open, and make sure to subscribe and share it with other tired parents who need it, because that 9:30 a.m. nap could be the rescue plan they're needing.
And I think Sally means it. Remember, she did say she loves to fix an early rise, so take her up on that.
I love to fix an early rise. I don't care for what I wish for.
Exactly.
I'll be hearing from all the early birds. All right, well, thank you for listening. This was a nice, short, sharp episode, but that's all it needs to be. Hold steady with your 9:30 nap, and we will see you on the next episode of Nap Trapped.
Thanks, team. Catch you later.
Bye.